Mr. Minh is 62 years old and lives in a quiet riverside village near the heart of the Mekong Delta. He's the kind of man you'd see pedaling his old bicycle to the morning market, tipping his conical hat politely to neighbors, and sharing stories over a pot of jasmine tea in the afternoon. Life has always been simple, filled with fresh air, family, and familiar routines. But about 6 months ago, something shifted. Small at first, easy to brush off, but enough to plant a seed of worry in the back of his mind. It began with a strange heaviness in his legs. At first, he thought maybe he'd just been sitting too long weaving fishing nets with his neighbors. Then came the tingling, like tiny ants crawling under his skin when he got up after resting. Still, he didn't say anything. Just old age, he told himself, chuckling quietly as he rubbed his calves. But when the cramps started waking him up at night, sharp, sudden spasms that twisted his muscles and made him wince in silence so as not to wake his wife, he knew it wasn't something to ignore anymore. One morning, while walking his granddaughter to school, he had to stop halfway and lean against a lamppost. His legs felt like stone, cold and aching, and his feet were oddly numb. That scared him. He'd always been strong, always dependable, carrying rice sacks, climbing mango trees, helping friends build fences. These were everyday things for Mr. Minh. But now, even walking a short distance left him short of breath and quietly ashamed. That evening, he sat down with his wife and said, "Maybe it's time I see the doctor." She looked at him with a mix of surprise and relief, knowing he was finally taking it seriously. At the clinic in town, the young doctor listened carefully as Mr. Minh described his symptoms. She nodded, then gently examined his legs, noting the pale color around his ankles, the slow return of blood when she pressed on his toes, and the faint bluish veins curling near the surface. After a vascular ultrasound, the diagnosis was clear. Mr. Minh was experiencing poor circulation, with early signs of venous insufficiency and possible blood clot risk in his lower limbs. "You've caught it in time," she told him. "But this is your body's way of warning you, it's asking for help." Back home, Mr. Minh sat on his bamboo bench, staring out at the river. He felt a quiet sadness, not just because of the diagnosis, but because he realized how much he'd ignored the signs, how long he'd told himself it was nothing. The body doesn't always scream when something's wrong. Sometimes, it whispers. A cramp here, a cold toe there. He thought about his friend Ut, who had a stroke last year while harvesting coconuts. Just a dizzy spell, Ut had said the week before. That memory sent a chill through Mr. Minh, stronger than any breeze off the water. Determined not to follow the same path, he began reading and asking questions. What causes poor circulation? What could he do besides take pills? The doctor had mentioned aging blood vessels, thickened blood, and the need to support his heart and veins naturally. He learned that blood needs to flow like a clean river, smooth, constant, and unhindered. But his river had become sluggish, with blockages building up like driftwood. The thought of blood clots terrified him, not just for himself, but for the impact it would have on his family. If something happened to him, who would help the grandchildren with homework? Or tend to the jackfruit trees? That night, while sipping a warm ginger tea, Mr. Minh decided he wouldn't just accept his condition. He'd act on it, slowly, intentionally, but with heart. No more shrugging off symptoms. He began making changes. He started walking gently every morning at sunrise, when the air was cool and still. He swapped out salty dried fish for grilled tilapia and added more green vegetables to every meal. And most importantly, he focused on 4 specific vitamins the doctor had recommended, nutrients known to support circulation and vascular health. These weren't strange or expensive pills from overseas. They were simple, familiar things, like leafy greens from his garden, citrus fruits from the neighbor's orchard, and almonds gifted by his cousin up north. Each step of this journey felt like reclaiming a part of himself. He began keeping a little notebook, jotting down when the tingling lessened or when he could walk a bit farther without stopping. Slowly, the night cramps faded. His toes felt warmer. And that dull heaviness in his legs? It began to lift, like mist burning away under the morning sun. It wasn't a miracle, it was awareness, consistency, and a bit of trust in nature's medicine. As he tended to his herb patch one afternoon, he thought about how many others might be going through the same thing, brushing off the symptoms, assuming it's just getting old. He wanted to share what he had learned, not as a lecture, but as a story, his story. If I had kept ignoring the signs, he later told his nephew, I might not be walking at all today. That realization gave him a kind of quiet pride, not in what he endured, but in how he chose to listen and respond. In this video, I'll walk you through Mr. Minh's journey, not just his symptoms, but the 5 warning signs you must never ignore, and the 4 powerful vitamins that made all the difference in his recovery. His experience is not unique. These are issues that affect millions of people as they age. But the earlier we understand them, the earlier we can take action, gently, wisely, and with purpose. When Mr. Minh first started feeling those sharp cramps at night, he didn't think too much of it. They'd come suddenly, always in his calves, and twist the muscle into a tight knot that made him gasp. He'd sit up on the edge of the bed, rub his legs slowly, and wait for the pain to pass. Just old bones, he muttered more than once. But what bothered him wasn't just the cramp, it was how often it returned. How it started happening every few nights, and how it left him tired the next morning from disrupted sleep. One evening, after a particularly long day working in the garden, the cramp hit harder than usual. It wasn't just in one leg this time, it radiated from both calves. Sharp and burning. He sat up and stretched. But the pain lingered longer than before. The next morning, he noticed something new. His legs felt heavy, almost as if someone had tied weights around his ankles. He tried to push through the day as usual, but the feeling wouldn't leave. That's when he knew something had shifted. His body was speaking louder now. After the visit to the clinic, when the young doctor explained his circulation was weakening, Mr. Minh began to reflect on all the little things he had dismissed. The tingling, the numbness, even the slow healing blister on his heel from a week-old sandal scrape. All signs pointing to one issue, poor blood flow. But it was the cramps that had finally made him pay attention. Those cramps weren't just annoying, they were messengers. His muscles weren't getting the oxygen they needed, and that was causing the painful spasms. The doctor had called it intermittent claudication. Mr. Minh didn't bother remembering the term. What he remembered was this: his legs were asking for help. Muscles, like any part of the body, rely on a steady supply of oxygen-rich blood to function. And when that supply is cut short, whether from narrowed arteries or poor vein function, pain is the result. It wasn't about being old. It was about blood not getting where it needed to go. Back at home, Mr. Minh started a new habit. Each morning before breakfast, he soaked a warm towel in hot water and wrapped it gently around his calves. He said it helped a little, especially on cooler days when his legs felt stiff. But more than that, it became a quiet moment of connection with his body. He wasn't ignoring it anymore. He was listening. He began walking slowly along the edge of the canal each morning. Just 15 minutes to start. Some days, his legs ached halfway through. Other days, they felt fine. He didn't push himself too hard, just enough to wake the blood vessels up. That's when he remembered something his own father used to say: a river that stops moving grows stale. It clicked. His blood was like the river near his house. If it didn't flow, it would build up waste, become murky, attract illness. The same thing was happening inside him. Movement wasn't just exercise, it was medicine. Even slow walks helped stir the water inside his veins, encouraging blood to move more freely. But exercise alone wasn't enough. The doctor had mentioned that some vitamins could help improve circulation naturally, specifically ones that relax and widen blood vessels, making it easier for blood to pass through. Mr. Minh's curiosity was piqued. He wasn't fond of pills, but if food could help, he was willing to try. So, he sat down with a small notepad and listed what foods he ate most often: rice, morning glory, dried fish, pork, pickled mustard greens. Then he circled the ones that might need replacing. That same evening, he asked his daughter to bring back a few things from the town market: some fresh salmon, eggs, a small bag of almonds, and dark green vegetables like spinach. They said these help blood flow, he told her. She smiled and added in a few oranges and kiwis too. One simple change he made that week was adding a boiled egg and a slice of steamed pumpkin to his breakfast, instead of salty dried anchovies. He tried lightly grilled fish. He even began drinking warm water with lemon in the mornings, something he once thought was strange but now felt refreshing. Within 2 weeks, he started to notice the cramps were not as intense. They still came, but not every night. And when they did, the pain didn't last as long. That gave him hope. One evening, as he sat rubbing a bit of herbal balm on his shins, his wife asked, "Do you still get those terrible cramps?" He paused, smiled slightly, and said, "Not like before. I think the legs are breathing better now." It was a simple sentence, but it carried weight. Mr. Minh was beginning to feel the changes, not just in his muscles, but in his attitude. He wasn't waiting for things to get worse anymore. He was meeting his body halfway. Of course, not every day was easy. Some mornings were slow, and sometimes he still felt tired. But there was a shift. The cramps had been his wake-up call. They were what forced him to stop, reflect, and change. And looking back, he was grateful. Because sometimes, it's pain that brings clarity. It's discomfort that drives us toward better care. And in Mr. Minh's case, those painful nighttime cramps became the doorway to a healthier, more attentive life. It was a breezy afternoon in February when Mr. Minh first realized his feet felt unusually cold. He was sitting outside on his wooden bench, sipping tea with his neighbor Chin, when he noticed something odd. The sun was still shining gently on the yard, and while the air was cool, it wasn't chilly. Yet, his feet, wrapped in socks and sandals, felt like they were dipped in river water. He pulled one foot up onto his knee and touched his ankle. It was colder than the rest of his leg. At first, he brushed it off. Maybe it was the concrete floor, or maybe his sandals had let in too much wind. But the feeling returned the next morning: same coldness, same numb sensation in his toes, even while the rest of his body felt normal. This time, he didn't ignore it. He remembered what the doctor said just 2 weeks earlier. After the cramps had sent him to the clinic, cold extremities can mean the blood isn't reaching there properly. It was starting to make sense. His blood wasn't moving the way it used to. His feet were at the farthest ends of the body's river system, and if that flow slowed down, the cold would be the first to show. That night, he sat with his wife, rubbing his feet with warm oil. "Why are your toes like ice?" she asked. He smiled gently but didn't answer right away. Truthfully, it scared him. Cold feet weren't just uncomfortable, they were a warning. Blood carried not just warmth but oxygen and nutrients. If they weren't getting to his toes, what else was missing? Would wounds heal slower? Would the nerves begin to dull? Would he one day lose the feeling altogether? These thoughts came like shadows, creeping into his usually steady heart. So he did what Mr. Minh always did when something worried him. he asked questions. This time, not to a doctor, but to himself. What makes blood move better? He wondered. The answer. He had already started to learn. Better circulation came from movement, nutrients, and reducing what blocked the flow, be it cholesterol, inflammation, or stiff vessels. He remembered the first vitamin the doctor had mentioned, vitamin B3, or niacin. He hadn't known much about it then, but he made a note to learn more. That week, he dug through old newspapers, looked through his nephew's internet phone, and found something interesting. Niacin helped open up the blood vessels. It was like widening the road for blood to pass through more freely. It didn't act like a medicine with fast, artificial effects, but like a gentle helper, encouraging the vessels to relax and let go. More importantly, it was found in everyday foods he could easily find, like skinless chicken, peanuts, tuna, and almonds. This was no foreign drug, it was local, natural, and accessible. The next day, he headed to the market and made a few quiet changes. Instead of buying pork belly and dried sausage, he bought fresh chicken breast and a small bag of raw peanuts. He didn't say much to the vendor, just nodded as he made his choices. At home, he asked his daughter to steam the chicken gently with ginger and lemon leaves, a dish he hadn't tried in years. That evening, as he chewed the soft, lean meat, he smiled quietly. It wasn't just food, it was medicine. The kind he understood. He began eating that way 3 times a week, less salt, more lean protein, and a handful of peanuts after lunch. He didn't expect miracles. But after 10 days, he noticed something subtle. His feet weren't as cold in the afternoons. The warmth seemed to last longer after a walk. And when he massaged them at night, they didn't feel like stones anymore. It was small, yes, but to Mr. Minh, it was everything. A sign that the road was clearing, the river moving again. One morning, he sat watching the sunrise, feet stretched out on a bamboo stool, tea in hand. His granddaughter ran up and touched his toes. "Ong, your feet are warm," she giggled. He laughed and nodded. "The blood's dancing again," he said. It became their little joke, dancing blood. But deep down, it reminded him of how easy it had been to overlook something so vital. He remembered how his old friend Bay had once lost a toe to a diabetic infection. Didn't feel a thing, Bay had said. That numbness had been the beginning of something serious. Mr. Minh was grateful he had caught his signs early. As part of his new routine, he added a small self-massage each night. Nothing fancy, just warm oil. Gentle strokes from the ankle to the toes, encouraging blood to reach every corner. Sometimes he used ginger oil. Other times just plain coconut oil warmed between his palms. He said it wasn't just for the body, but for the mind, a quiet time to reflect, listen, and appreciate the journey he was on. His wife even joined him some nights, massaging her own knees while they chatted softly. Over time, Mr. Minh noticed something else too. The cramps had become rare. The tingling was less frequent, and even his sleep had improved. He didn't jump to conclusions, but he could feel his legs becoming more awake. He still had days when the heaviness returned, but it didn't last long. And each time it did, he knew exactly what to do: walk, stretch, eat the right foods, and listen closely to his body's quiet signals. One afternoon, he met a neighbor who complained about his cold feet and numbness. Mr. Minh listened, then shared a few things, not advice, just stories. How he changed what he ate, how he walked every morning, even for 10 minutes, how he rubbed his feet at night like his father once did. The neighbor nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe I'll try the chicken and peanuts too," he said. Mr. Minh smiled, not because he was proud, but because he realized that healing doesn't need to come from pills or hospitals alone. Sometimes it comes from listening, learning, and making small changes that echo through the body like a ripple on the river. So yes, it started with cold feet, but it led to something much warmer, a return to awareness, care, and quiet resilience. For Mr. Minh, that was enough. It was a late Sunday morning when Mr. Minh first noticed the tingling sensation turn into something more worrisome. He had been standing in the front yard pruning his beetle vine, something he did regularly to keep it tidy. But when he stepped back to admire his work, his left foot felt strange. Not painful, not cold, just dull, as if someone had wrapped it in cloth. He shook it a little. No difference. He tapped it against the ground. Still nothing. The familiar pins and needles he'd grown used to were gone, replaced by a muted numbness that crawled from his toes to the midfoot. He walked back into the house, sat down on his favorite woven mat, and pulled off his sandal. He pressed on the skin above his toes. Normally, he'd feel the pressure immediately. But now, it felt delayed, like his brain was catching up to the signal. That's when the worry started again. The cramps and coldness he could manage. But this lack of feeling was unfamiliar. And it triggered something deeper in him, the fear of losing control over his own body. That afternoon, he didn't say anything to his wife. Instead, he pulled out the little notebook where he had begun tracking his health. He wrote down the date, the time, and the symptoms. Left foot numb, especially after standing. Tingling reduced. No pain. It was short, but important. Mr. Minh had learned something vital in the past few weeks. What doesn't get recorded often gets forgotten. And forgotten symptoms were the ones that could turn into problems. The next day, he visited the doctor again, not because he was panicking, but because he wanted to understand. The doctor smiled at his notebook and said, "You're paying close attention. And that's good." After checking his circulation again and performing a few simple nerve tests, she explained what might be happening. When blood flow is reduced over time, nerves begin to suffer. It's like a garden not getting water. First, it wilts. Then it dries. Tingling is the first warning. Numbness means the nerves are beginning to struggle. That was hard to hear. But Mr. Minh appreciated the honesty. The doctor reassured him it wasn't too late. "We need to support those nerves," she said. "Good blood flow. Yes, but also the right nutrients to keep them healthy." She mentioned one he hadn't focused on before, vitamin B12. It wasn't just for energy, she explained. It played a key role in nerve health, helping protect the myelin sheath, the layer that insulates and supports nerve communication. That night, back at home, Mr. Minh opened his notebook again and wrote, "Look into vitamin B12. Nerves need it. Maybe why foot is numb." He then asked his daughter, who often helped him research on her phone, to find out more about B12-rich foods. Together, they discovered that it's mostly found in animal-based sources, like eggs, milk, fish, and liver. Mr. Minh wasn't too fond of liver, but he could definitely eat more fish and eggs. Over the next week, he added boiled eggs back into his breakfast and began including small portions of sardines and mackerel in his meals. He also tried a homemade bone broth with beef marrow, which he simmered slowly with star anise and ginger. Not only did it warm his belly, it felt nourishing, comforting in a way that reminded him of his mother's cooking. He began calling it his nerve soup, joking with his granddaughter that it helped wake up sleepy toes. As days passed, he noticed something subtle. While the numbness didn't disappear, it no longer spread beyond the toes. And by the third week, the tingling began to return in small waves after walks. It was strange to be happy about a tingling sensation, but to Mr. Minh, it meant his nerves were waking up again. The signals were reconnecting. He wasn't just hoping for healing anymore. He was participating in it. But food alone wasn't his only adjustment. He also started doing something new, rotating his ankles gently each morning and stretching his toes. Not like a young athlete, but like a man respecting his age. Giving his feet and legs time to adjust. 5 minutes before his morning walk, he would sit on his mat and flex each foot slowly. Then roll a wooden stick under his arches. He said it felt like massaging the roads before the traffic began. He also stopped sitting for long periods without moving. Before, he might sit for an hour chatting with neighbors. Now, every 20 minutes, he'd excuse himself, stand, walk to the kitchen and back, just to keep the blood moving. Every little step counts, he told himself, even inside the house. There was one more thing Mr. Minh did, and it might have been the most important. He started telling his story. Not publicly, not on the internet, but to his friends at the tea house, his brothers-in-law, even the fish vendor at the market. He'd say, "My foot went numb, but I found out it was my blood and my nerves needing help." People listened, asked questions, and sometimes even shared their own symptoms: swelling, cold legs, sudden cramps. It became less about fear and more about awareness. In sharing, he was also healing. By the 4th week, he wrote another note in his journal: tingling returned. Better than no feeling. Legs stronger after soup plus walks plus eggs. Still work to do. It was humble, hopeful, and real. Because that was Mr. Minh's story now, not one of dramatic recovery, but of slow, steady improvement grounded in care, food, movement, and listening. And one morning, as he bent down to tie his sandal, he paused and tapped his toes gently on the ground. He felt it. Not fully, but clearly enough. A quiet warmth returned to his left foot. He looked up at the sky and smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because he knew he was walking in the right direction. It was a hot afternoon in early March when Mr. Minh noticed something new. As he was drying his feet after a midday shower, he caught sight of a faint, purplish patch just above his right ankle. At first, he thought it might be a bruise, maybe from bumping into something in the garden. But when he pressed on it, it didn't hurt. It just looked dull, almost like the color of a fading plum. A few days later, the same spot was still there, unchanged. And then he noticed another one forming just behind his heel. He didn't panic, but he felt a tightness in his chest. Discoloration, he remembered, was one of the signs the doctor had mentioned during his first visit. When your blood isn't reaching the skin properly, oxygen levels drop and the color of the skin can start to change. He gently ran his hand over the patch, noticing it felt colder than the rest of his leg. Slightly rougher too. It was a small mark, but it said a lot. That evening, he sat quietly at the dinner table, swirling his spoon in a bowl of soup. His wife asked if something was wrong. He showed her the patch and explained what he thought it might be. She frowned. Maybe it's nothing, but maybe it's your blood again. He nodded, already deciding that tomorrow, he'd dig deeper, not just into the meaning behind the symptom, but into what he could do about it. The next morning, Mr. Minh didn't go to the clinic. Instead, he went to the library at the village cultural center. It was a small room, but it had 2 old health books and a few magazines on aging and nutrition. He flipped through pages until something caught his eye, an article on vitamin C and its role in circulation and skin health. It mentioned that vitamin C wasn't just for immunity, it helped strengthen blood vessel walls, improve skin color, and reduce inflammation that made vessels fragile. That sparked something. Mr. Minh had been focusing on blood flow and nerve support, but he hadn't paid much attention to the blood vessels themselves, the pipes carrying the flow. If those walls were weak or inflamed, It didn't matter how well the blood flowed, it would still leak, stagnate, or struggle to reach its destination. And the skin, especially in the lower legs, was one of the first places to show that stress. That day, Mr. Minh made another simple change. He added fresh fruits to his routine. Not the sugary dried ones he sometimes snacked on during Tet, but fresh, water-rich fruits high in vitamin C. His daughter brought home a bag of guava and 2 ripe oranges. He peeled one orange, segment by segment, letting the juice soak into his fingers. It wasn't just a snack, it was part of his medicine now. Each morning for the next week, he ate 1 guava or an orange before breakfast. Sometimes he blended spinach with lemon juice and mint for a morning drink. Other days, he tossed chopped red bell pepper into his noodle soup, an unusual combination, but one he grew to enjoy. He learned that even vegetables like broccoli and mustard greens carried this important vitamin. He didn't need pills, just the right plate. By the second week, something curious happened. The purple patch above his ankle began to fade. It didn't disappear overnight, but the edges softened, and the skin color gradually returned to a light tan. He ran his finger over it one morning and smiled. Like the river clearing after the mud settles, he thought. He also noticed that small scratches on his legs, like from tending to his bitter melon vines, began healing faster. They no longer lingered for days looking raw or red. This gave him confidence. His skin, his vessels, his nerves, they were responding to the care. He was helping them do their job again. 1 meal, 1 walk, 1 stretch at a time. Around that time, Mr. Minh also began making a broth with spinach and garlic, based on a recipe an older neighbor had once shared. It was light, green, and surprisingly refreshing. Good for the blood, the neighbor had said. Whether it was the spinach or the garlic or just the act of nourishing himself with intention, Mr. Minh felt a difference. His legs didn't swell as much in the evenings. He could squat longer in the garden. Even his neighbors noticed him moving more freely, standing straighter. One day, a neighbor named Tu asked him quietly, "Did you take some special medicine?" Mr. Minh shook his head and said, "No, just oranges, spinach, and walking before breakfast." The simplicity of his answer made them both laugh. But behind that laugh was a truth too many forget. Healing often begins with what we already have, if only we know how to use it. He also began to reflect more deeply on what he had been ignoring for years. The way he used to load his meals with salt and dried meats. The long hours sitting without moving. The belief that once you pass 60, discomfort is normal. But it wasn't aging alone, it was a slow neglect of circulation, nutrition, and movement. He wasn't blaming himself, but he was becoming aware. And with awareness came power. That month, Mr. Minh added another page to his notebook, one filled with small daily habits. Walk 20 minutes in the morning. Eat 1 vitamin C-rich fruit daily. Use spinach or red pepper in meals twice a week. Stretch legs for 5 minutes at night. Massage ankles every evening. Drink water after waking up. It looked simple, even ordinary. But to Mr. Minh, it was sacred. These were not chores, they were choices. And every choice pushed the needle just a little closer toward health. By the end of that month, the discoloration on his skin had nearly vanished. More importantly, no new patches appeared. His skin tone looked healthier, his energy more stable, and that dragging heaviness in his legs? It no longer pulled him down by noon. He stood longer, walked further, and rested better. All this because of a small patch of color on his ankle. A mark he once feared. But that turned out to be a blessing. It caught his attention. It made him act. And in acting, he began to reclaim something he thought he had lost, his balance, his strength, and his belief in his body's ability to heal. The pain came unexpectedly. It was a sunny morning, and Mr. Minh had decided to walk a bit further than usual, passing the rice fields and heading toward a small bridge that crossed the canal. He had done this walk countless times. It was part of his routine now, slow, mindful steps, breathing in the scent of the morning dew and damp earth. But halfway through, a sudden, sharp pain struck his right calf. It wasn't a cramp this time. It was different, deeper, like a tight band squeezing the muscle from the inside. He stopped immediately, one hand gripping the side of a tree, the other rubbing the stiff muscle. He waited. After a minute or so, the pain subsided, as if nothing had happened. Confused, he resumed walking. But just 10 steps later, the pain returned, same spot, same burning sensation. This time, he didn't wait. He turned around and walked back home, slowly, unsure of what had just happened. Later that day, sitting in his bamboo chair, he replayed the moment over and over. This wasn't like the cramps from before. It came only when walking and disappeared when he rested. That pattern made him pause. He opened his notebook again, writing, calf pain while walking. Eased after stopping. Pain came back quickly when resuming. Why? It was a new kind of worry. That afternoon, Mr. Minh visited the clinic again. The doctor nodded thoughtfully as he described the sensation. She performed a quick check of his pulses in both legs, noting the pressure and timing. Then she said the words he had suspected but hoped not to hear: intermittent claudication, a sign of reduced blood flow in the leg arteries. It's like your leg is asking for oxygen, she explained gently. When you walk, your muscles need more blood. But if the arteries are narrowed, that blood can't get through fast enough. So the muscles complain. They hurt. They force you to stop. Mr. Minh listened carefully. He wasn't frightened, but he was alert. This was a new layer of his condition, and he needed to respond accordingly. The doctor reassured him that it was manageable, especially since he had already made progress with his diet and habits. You're already on the right track, she said. But now we need to help the arteries themselves, keep them flexible, clean, and open. She talked about something he hadn't focused on before: inflammation inside the vessels. Over time, poor diet, stress, and lack of movement can cause tiny irritations in the arterial walls. These irritations build up plaques, fatty blockages that narrow the passageways. The good news? Certain foods and nutrients could reduce that inflammation, support vessel elasticity, and help his arteries perform better under pressure. One of the nutrients she emphasized was vitamin E, a powerful antioxidant that not only protects blood vessels from oxidative stress but also helps maintain their flexibility. It also improves the function of nitric oxide, a compound that helps vessels relax and widen. That sounded exactly like what Mr. Minh needed. So, the next step on his journey was clear. That very evening, he sat down with his daughter again to plan out meals that would bring in more vitamin E. They learned that this vitamin was abundant in certain foods he already enjoyed, like sunflower seeds, almonds, avocados, and spinach. Olive oil was another excellent source, particularly the cold-pressed kind. He smiled as he realized he didn't have to eat anything strange or unfamiliar. Just more of what his body was quietly asking for. The next day, he began incorporating a handful of sunflower seeds after his walk. And in the afternoons, he'd have slices of avocado sprinkled with a touch of salt and lime. He also swapped out his cooking oil with a small bottle of extra virgin olive oil his daughter had bought from the town center. At first, the taste was unusual, slightly peppery, but he grew to like it. He also restarted his walking routine, but with one small change. Instead of pushing himself to walk far, he adopted a new method: walk, rest, walk. He would walk until he felt the first hint of tightness. Then pause, no shame, no guilt, just listen to the body. After 2 to 3 minutes of rest, He'd continue. It was slower. Yes. But surprisingly peaceful. It became more like a walking meditation than exercise. And it allowed his legs to adjust gradually, rebuilding strength without triggering that deep pain. Within 2 weeks, he noticed something remarkable. The pain that had once come after 100 meters now came only after 200. And when it did come, it was less intense, more like a whisper than a shout. This quiet victory was not lost on him. He wrote in his journal, calf pain improving. Walked further today. Avocado and olive oil daily. Legs feel lighter. These weren't just words, they were milestones. He also added a few deep breathing exercises each morning. The doctor had explained that improving oxygen flow throughout the body helped support overall vascular health. So Mr. Minh found a spot near the jackfruit tree, closed his eyes, and practiced slow, rhythmic breaths. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. It calmed his mind and, in his words, cleared the smoke from the blood. The biggest shift, however, came not from food or walking, but from his mindset. Before, he had always seen pain as something to ignore or conquer. Now, he saw it as guidance. The calf pain didn't mean weakness, it meant awareness. It meant his body was alive, communicating, adapting. And because he listened, he could adjust. One morning, while walking with his granddaughter, she pointed to a butterfly fluttering near a bush. He stopped, not because of pain, but simply to admire the moment. She looked up and asked, "Ong, does your leg still hurt?" He chuckled and said, "Only when I don't listen to it." She didn't quite understand, but she smiled anyway. And for Mr. Minh, that was enough. That day, he returned home, made a simple lunch of spinach sautéed with olive oil and garlic, and toasted a slice of bread with mashed avocado. As he ate, he reflected on how much had changed, not just in his legs, but in his approach to health. Every pain, every symptom, every discomfort had become a signpost, not a wall. And slowly, step by step, he was finding his way through. One evening, Mr. Minh sat under the dim light of his porch, a warm breeze swaying the banana leaves outside. He had just finished massaging his calves with ginger oil, a ritual that had become second nature. His legs felt better these days, lighter, less tense, but there was still something on his mind. That afternoon, during his follow-up visit to the clinic, the doctor had mentioned something serious, the potential for deep vein thrombosis, or DVT. She wasn't saying he had it, but that his symptoms, cold feet, visible veins, pain while walking, put him at a slightly higher risk. And that, if left unaddressed, it could turn into a dangerous blood clot deep inside the leg. She had spoken softly, reassuringly, but Mr. Minh had heard every word clearly. A clot could travel. It could block blood flow to the lungs. It could even cause a stroke. He nodded silently during the conversation, but inside, his thoughts raced. He remembered his neighbor's cousin who had been hospitalized just a few months ago, just felt breathless, then collapsed. They'd said, now, it wasn't just about cramps or numbness. It was about preventing something life-threatening. That night, as he sipped a cup of warm turmeric tea, Mr. Minh thought deeply about his next step. He didn't want to live in fear, but he also didn't want to live in ignorance. So once again, he turned to what had always helped him, understanding the root, finding the natural path, and making small, sustainable changes. He remembered what the doctor had said just before he left. Support your blood, not just how it flows, but how it behaves. Some vitamins can help reduce clotting risk and inflammation without thinning your blood dangerously. She had pointed out one in particular, vitamin K. It seemed confusing at first. Isn't vitamin K involved in clotting? Wouldn't that make it worse? But the doctor explained gently that there are two types: vitamin K1, which helps with normal clotting when needed, like healing a wound, and vitamin K2, which has a very different role. K2 helps prevent calcium buildup in arteries, a major cause of stiff vessels and poor blood flow. When arteries calcify, they lose flexibility, increasing the risk of clot formation in narrow or damaged areas. Vitamin K2 helps direct calcium away from blood vessels and into bones, where it belongs. This fascinated Mr. Minh. A vitamin that didn't fight against clotting entirely, but guided it properly, like a wise traffic officer managing a busy intersection. He liked that idea. His body didn't need to be stopped, it just needed better direction. The next morning, he added a new item to his notebook: find K2 foods. With his daughter's help, he learned that the richest sources were fermented foods, like natto, a sticky fermented soybean dish from Japan, and aged cheeses. Those weren't easy to find in the Mekong Delta, but there were still options. Egg yolks, liver, and fermented vegetables, things that were more familiar to him. So, he started small. 3 times a week, he added a soft boiled egg to his breakfast, yolk runny and golden. He also asked his wife to ferment mustard greens and daikon radish again, a tradition she had paused over the years. Within days, a large clay jar sat near the kitchen, bubbling quietly with tangy aroma. Each meal now included a small spoonful of fermented vegetables, not just for taste but for heart and vessel health. He also discovered something else: leafy greens like kale and spinach, which he had already been eating for vitamin C, also provided vitamin K1. While not the same as K2, the doctor said K1 still played a role in keeping blood function balanced. Consistency is more important than quantity, she had added, especially if you're eating well and not on blood thinners. That comforted him. Meanwhile, Mr. Minh continued his walking routine, but with another small twist. He started doing light ankle pumps and toe flexes whenever he sat for long periods, especially while watching television or during long conversations. The doctor had taught him that these small foot movements help push blood back toward the heart and prevent it from pooling in the lower legs, which can trigger clots. It's like squeezing the sponge, she said. You're keeping the blood fresh and moving. In just a few weeks, these changes started making a difference, not just physically, but emotionally. Mr. Minh no longer felt that sense of quiet panic when he felt a cramp or saw a vein bulge. Instead, he felt equipped. He had tools now: fermented foods, leafy greens, egg yolks, stretching, and above all, a growing understanding of how his body functioned. One morning, after his walk, he sat by the river and looked at his legs. They were strong, not perfect. Not like they once were, but steady. And that steadiness came not from medicine, but from his actions. From noticing early signs. From choosing food as support. From moving even when it was uncomfortable. And most importantly, from listening. Later that day, he shared what he had learned with a younger man in the village whose father had recently complained about leg swelling. Mr. Minh explained the role of blood vessels and how food could support them. He even brought him a small jar of fermented mustard greens. Start with this, he smiled. It's good for your bones and your blood. The man looked surprised. Is this really medicine? Mr. Minh laughed. No. But it keeps the medicine away. It was a simple answer, but one that captured his entire philosophy. Prevention, not fear. Nourishment, not punishment. By the end of that month, he had not only maintained his progress but gained something more: peace of mind. The threat of clots still existed. Yes, but it no longer loomed over him. It had been replaced by knowledge, daily rituals, and food that fed both body and spirit. His blood, once slow and uncertain, now moved with quiet confidence, like the river he lived beside, flowing forward, day by day. By mid-April, the days had grown hotter in the Mekong Delta, even with the soft shade of banana trees and the occasional breeze coming off the canal. The midday sun bore down heavily. Mr. Minh had resumed many of his normal activities, tending to the garden, fixing the roof tiles, even teaching his grandson how to bait a fishing hook, but one thing still bothered him: the heaviness in his legs. It came gradually, often by early afternoon, a dragging sensation, as if weights were tied around his calves. His legs didn't hurt, and there was no cramping, but it felt like walking through thick mud. Even lying down for a short rest didn't fully relieve it. The feeling wasn't painful, but it made him slower, less steady, and quietly frustrated. He thought about all the changes he had already made: walking in the mornings, adding vitamin C, B12, K, and E to his meals, doing his ankle pumps. So why was this heaviness still lingering? One morning, after his usual walk and breakfast of guava, eggs, and steamed greens, he sat under the jackfruit tree, notebook in hand. He wrote a simple question: why still heavy legs? Then he sat back and stared at the page, hoping the answer would come to him. That same afternoon, his neighbor Auntie Nam came by with a bag of fresh mint and a bowl of soup. They chatted about the heat, the fish season, and family matters. When she mentioned that she had started using a cool herbal foot soak to ease her swelling ankles, Mr. Minh's ears perked up. She explained how she used warm water with mint, lemongrass, and a few slices of ginger. "It's not magic," she said with a shrug. "But after 20 minutes, my legs feel lighter, like they're breathing again." That night, Mr. Minh gave it a try. He filled a small basin with warm water, added mint leaves from his garden, sliced up some lemongrass, and dropped in a piece of ginger. He sat on his bamboo chair, feet soaking, watching the stars appear. The scent was calming, and the warmth soothed his tired soles. But more importantly, by the time he finished and dried his feet, the heaviness seemed to have lifted, if only a little. Encouraged, he added this to his evening routine, 3 times a week. But he knew a foot soak alone wasn't the solution. There had to be something else, something deeper. He thought back to his visit with the doctor, and one phrase stood out: venous return. It meant the blood returning to the heart from the lower parts of the body. If that return was slow, if the uphill climb wasn't happening efficiently, it could leave the legs feeling heavy, swollen, or sluggish. The doctor had mentioned that movement was key, but not just walking. Calf muscle engagement was especially important, as the calves act like a second heart, pushing blood back up when they contract. That gave him an idea. The next morning, instead of just walking on flat ground, Mr. Minh added small challenges to his routine: walking up the slope behind the rice field, stepping over short stone blocks in his yard, doing slow heel raises near the kitchen table. He began lifting his heels and standing on his toes for 10 seconds, repeating it 10 times each day. At first, it felt strange, even tiring. But after a week, he noticed something. The heaviness in his legs was starting later in the day. Instead of feeling it by noon, it came closer to evening. And some days, it didn't come at all. He was onto something. To support this physically, he also looked into foods that helped reduce swelling and improve vein tone. His daughter read out a list from a trusted Vietnamese health site: beets, berries, citrus fruits, garlic, and leafy greens. Mr. Minh smiled. Those were all things he either grew or could easily get. That week, he made a beet salad with lemon and mint, cooked lightly stir-fried greens with garlic, and added a few slices of banana flour to his soup. These weren't fancy recipes, they were folk traditions, elevated by purpose. He also started taking a break in the middle of the day, not just to rest, but to elevate his legs. He placed a rolled blanket under his calves and laid down, allowing gravity to assist blood flow. Just 20 minutes after lunch, it became a quiet, healing habit. He said it reminded him of being a child, swinging in a hammock, legs up, eyes closed, listening to the wind. Only now, the purpose was to lift the pressure from his veins and help his heart catch a break. After 2 weeks of this combined approach, elevating his legs, strengthening his calves, and adding cooling, circulation-friendly foods, something began to shift. The heaviness faded faster. It didn't last as long. On some days, he forgot it was even there. More importantly, he regained his confidence in walking, gardening, and even going to the market without worrying he'd have to sit down halfway through. One afternoon, while walking back from the temple, his wife commented, "You walk like your younger self again." He laughed and said, "That's just the mint, beets, and a little toe magic." She didn't know what that meant, but she chuckled anyway. Mr. Minh later wrote in his notebook, "Heaviness is not weakness, it's blood asking for movement. Give it help, and it will rise." It was a simple reflection, but one that captured his truth. The weight in his legs had never just been about age, it was about circulation, gravity, and a lifetime of habits finally being rebalanced. And the most surprising part? His midday breaks, what he once saw as wasted time, had become sacred. A moment for his legs to breathe. A moment to realign with his body's pace. He realized that healing didn't always come through effort. Sometimes, it came through listening, resting, and letting the body do what it was designed to do, if we give it the space. It was a quiet morning after a night of soft rain. Mr. Minh had just finished his walk around the pond near his village, stopping occasionally to stretch and breathe in the fresh air. As he returned home and removed his shoes at the door, he caught a glimpse of his calves in the light filtering through the porch slats. That's when he noticed it, a bluish, winding line just below the back of his right knee. Thin, twisted, almost like a stream on a map. He leaned in closer, pressing the skin gently with his thumb. It wasn't painful, but it hadn't been there before, not like this. A few days later, he spotted another line forming on his left leg. That one was smaller but seemed to follow the same pattern, bluish, squiggly, slightly raised. He didn't need a doctor to tell him what they were. Varicose veins. At first, he felt a wave of unease. Weren't these signs of weakening veins? Hadn't he done everything right? He had changed his diet, walked daily, stretched, and improved his posture. Why were these veins still appearing? Was it too late? These questions quietly unsettled him. That evening, he sat with a warm cup of green tea and opened his notebook. This time, he didn't write a symptom. Instead, he asked a question to himself: what are my veins trying to say? Later that week, he returned to the clinic. The young doctor greeted him warmly and listened carefully as he described the visible veins. She examined his legs, checked for swelling, skin temperature, and any signs of clotting. After a few quiet minutes, she gave a calm nod. "You're doing very well, Mr. Minh," she said gently. "These veins aren't a failure. They're just part of your body's story." She explained that varicose veins form when the tiny valves inside the veins, which help push blood back up toward the heart, begin to weaken. When those valves don't close properly, blood can pool in the lower limbs, especially after years of standing, lifting, or sitting for long periods. It's more common than you think, she added, especially after 60. Mr. Minh listened, then asked, "Can I stop them from getting worse?" The doctor smiled. "Yes. And you already are." She recommended a few more things to support venous health. First, compression socks, light ones, not too tight, could gently support his leg veins and improve blood return. Second, she suggested avoiding prolonged sitting or standing without movement. Think of it like shifting water in a bucket. She explained. If you stir it regularly, it stays clear. If you let it sit too long, it starts to stagnate. That evening, Mr. Minh reflected deeply. He realized that the veins weren't something to hide. They were his body's history in plain sight, marks of decades spent working in the fields, carrying his children, squatting by the river to catch fish, helping neighbors fix roofs. These veins were stories, not warnings. Still, he wanted to help them. So he began making a few gentle adjustments. First, he purchased a pair of light compression socks from the town's pharmacy. At first, they felt strange, snug and firm, but after 2 days, he noticed his legs felt less achy in the afternoons. The heaviness stayed away longer, and he could garden longer without needing breaks. He wore them during the day, especially when he knew he'd be standing or walking for hours, and took them off before bed. Second, he elevated his legs more frequently, now not just after lunch, but once in the late afternoon as well. Just 10 to 15 minutes each time, resting them on a pillow or bamboo bench, letting gravity help the blood return to his heart. He noticed this helped him fall asleep faster at night, and his legs felt calmer. He also returned to a folk remedy his grandmother had once shared, soaking cloth strips in cold herbal water and wrapping them around the legs in the evenings. He used chamomile and crushed betel leaves, which cooled the skin and soothed the visible veins. It didn't remove the veins, but it made his legs feel refreshed and emotionally. It reminded him of being cared for as a child. More importantly, he focused on gratitude rather than frustration. He no longer looked at the veins as something to erase. Instead, they became reminders, gentle nudges to keep moving, to stay kind to his legs, and to notice when he'd been sitting too long. That month, he also began making a new evening tea, a mix of hawthorn, lemon balm, and dried orange peel. It was mildly sweet, gently astringent, and calming. Hawthorn, as he'd learned, helped with both heart and vascular health. Drink for the blood, he called it. And his wife, after trying a cup, asked for it again the next day. One particularly touching moment came when his grandson pointed to the back of his knee and asked, "Ong, what's that blue line?" Mr. Minh smiled, pulled the boy close, and said, "That's a road I've walked for many years. It shows I've stood a lot, walked far, and worked hard." His grandson touched the line gently and nodded. It looked strong. Mr. Minh's heart warmed. He had turned what could have been a moment of shame into one of quiet pride. Over time, the veins didn't vanish. Some days they were more visible than others, especially after long hours in the sun or forgetting to move for a while. But he was no longer afraid of them. He had learned to support, not fight, to understand, not resist. His lifestyle was now rich with foods that nourished the veins, like garlic, citrus fruits, and berries. He used olive oil generously and rarely touched processed meat or salt-heavy dishes. He also discovered something unexpected: dancing. During a community festival, the music started playing, a gentle old waltz. A group of elders began swaying slowly in a circle. His wife nudged him forward. At first hesitant, he eventually joined in, smiling, stepping carefully, letting the rhythm carry him. His calves worked, his balance sharpened, his blood moved. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and the scent of sticky rice in the air, his veins did not matter. What mattered was how he felt in his body, light, warm, and alive. That night, he wrote in his notebook, "The veins are visible, but they don't define me. What I do each day, that's what shapes my strength." Mr. Minh had learned that aging doesn't mean fading. It means adjusting, adapting, and continuing the dance, even if you do it with new lines on your skin and a slower pace in your steps. And those visible veins? They were just part of the rhythm. For months, Mr. Minh had gotten used to being gently awakened by his body. Some nights it was the familiar dull ache behind his knees. Other nights, a sudden tightening in his calves jolted him from sleep. Though less frequent now, these cramps had been his longtime companions, arriving like uninvited guests just as he was beginning to drift into the deepest part of rest. But one evening, something changed. It was an ordinary day. Mr. Minh had taken his morning walk, eaten a lunch of brown rice, steamed greens, and a small serving of grilled fish. He'd rested for 20 minutes with his legs propped up, then spent the afternoon helping his neighbor fix a broken fence. By dinner time, he felt pleasantly tired. He sipped his hawthorn tea, did his ankle rolls, massaged his feet gently with warm oil, and tucked himself in with a grateful sigh. And for the first time in what felt like ages, he slept straight through the night. When morning came, he woke to sunlight pouring in through the shutters, the chirping of birds, and the distant clinking of pots from the kitchen. But no cramp, no tingling, no stiffness, just a soft, grounded peace in his body. He lay there for a moment longer, simply listening to the silence in his legs. It was a small thing, maybe even forgettable to someone else. But for Mr. Minh, it was a quiet, deeply personal victory. Over breakfast, he told his wife with a note of joy in his voice. No cramps last night. Not even a whisper. She looked up from peeling a mango and smiled. Maybe your legs finally trust you. That sentence lingered in his heart. It made him reflect. His journey hadn't been about quick fixes or dramatic changes. It had been about slow, careful attention, listening to his body, making peace with its signals, and responding with kindness through food, movement, rest, and patience. He thought back to the early days when the cramps were sharp and unrelenting, when they made him dread the night. At the time, he had assumed they were just signs of age. "I'm getting old," he used to say. But now, he knew better. The cramps were calls for help. His muscles had been crying out for oxygen, his blood vessels begging for support, his nerves warning him gently that something wasn't right. What changed? A few key things, and none of them extreme. First, he had steadily incorporated vitamin B3, niacin, into his daily diet. From grilled chicken breast to a handful of peanuts, he had learned to fuel his body with foods that widened his blood vessels and reduced tension inside his veins. The cramps, which were once a sign of muscular oxygen shortage, began to retreat as blood flow improved. Second, his discovery of vitamin E through avocados, olive oil, and sunflower seeds added another layer of healing. It wasn't just about easing inflammation. It was about helping his arteries relax, reducing internal friction, and letting blood move freely. Third, his nightly stretching routine had become a ritual, no longer rushed or mechanical. It was a time of mindful reconnection with his body. He had learned which muscles needed the most attention: the calves, the arches of his feet, the back of his knees. By gently extending and contracting those areas before bed, he taught his body that it could rest, not brace for pain. And then, of course, there was hydration, a habit he had underestimated in the past. Now, he kept a small clay jug by his bedside. Throughout the day, he drank warm water with lemon or ginger, and avoided caffeine after lunch. This alone, he believed, played a role in reducing nighttime cramps by keeping his muscles supple and his blood thin enough to circulate with ease. That week, Mr. Minh began keeping track not only of the days he experienced symptoms, but the days he didn't. He called it his wellness count. Each night he slept through uninterrupted. He marked with a small check mark. Within 2 weeks, he had 6 check marks. That was 6 nights of true rest. 6 mornings of gratitude. And in that simple measure, he saw progress. One evening, his grandson asked why he kept that little list next to his bed. Mr. Minh smiled and replied, "To remind myself that healing happens quietly." He didn't say more, but the boy nodded, somehow understanding. Mr. Minh also began encouraging a few of his friends, men around his age who still dismissed their body's signals as just part of getting old. He spoke gently, never preaching. "You know those cramps at night?" he'd ask. "Sometimes they're not age. Sometimes it's just blood that needs a bit of help." He shared what had worked for him, like eating steamed pumpkin with crushed peanuts, doing a few toe raises before brushing his teeth, or soaking feet in ginger water before bed. These weren't expensive or difficult. They were small, doable things, changes anyone could try. One friend, Uncle Tam, came back a week later and said, "I did that thing with the lemon water and the stretching. First night in months I didn't wake up yelling." They both laughed. And in that laughter, Mr. Minh felt something deeper, community healing. Not just for himself, but for others, too. By the end of the month, Mr. Minh had reached 10 checkmarks. 10 full nights of sleep. 10 mornings with strength in his step. 10 reminders that, even in his 60s, the body can still respond, still improve, still find balance. And perhaps most powerfully, he had reclaimed something often lost with age, confidence in his own body. One morning, while walking through the morning mist toward the riverside, he whispered quietly to himself, "My legs have carried me through so much. Now it's my turn to carry them, with care, with food, with rest." He no longer feared the night. And when he did feel a slight twitch or tug, he didn't panic. He simply acknowledged it, stretched a little longer, drank a bit more water, and trusted that his body knew the way. Because now, he had given it the tools to heal. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Mr. Minh was picking papayas from the backyard tree, something he had done countless times before. The fruit was ripe, slightly soft, and dangling just a bit out of reach. He shifted his weight, stepped onto the edge of a flat rock, and stretched his arm upward. In that moment, his right foot wobbled slightly, and suddenly, he lost his balance. His reflexes were quick enough. He stumbled back and caught the nearby fence, but the shock was real. His heart pounded. His knees shook, not from the near fall, but from the realization he hadn't felt stable. He sat down on the small concrete step behind the kitchen, breathing slowly, letting the adrenaline pass. It wasn't a fall. He wasn't hurt. But he knew this was important. That small moment, that loss of footing, was a warning. Balance isn't just about strong legs, it's about nerves, circulation, and the connection between brain, muscles, and movement. Something wasn't fully connecting. That evening, as he massaged his calves and sipped on his herbal tea, he remembered a sentence the doctor once told him during an earlier visit. Circulation problems don't just affect your legs, they affect your reflexes, your spatial awareness, and even your confidence in movement. He hadn't thought much of it then, but now it hit home. He began to reflect more closely. Lately, there had been other subtle signs. The way he sometimes hesitated before stepping over the garden trench. How he occasionally reached out to steady himself on the kitchen counter. Even how he found himself walking slower on uneven paths. These weren't random habits. They were the body's way of protecting itself by compensating for a weakening sense of stability. So, once again, Mr. Minh decided not to wait. He started by observing his posture throughout the day. He noticed how often he leaned forward, how tight his hips had become, and how his ankles didn't feel as flexible as they once were. He consulted his daughter, who pulled up a video about balance exercises for older adults. "These are gentle," she said. but they wake up the muscles that keep us steady. That morning, he began adding 5 simple movements to his daily routine. Heel-to-toe walks along the hallway, standing on one leg for 10 seconds at a time, using the wall if needed, side steps across the porch and back, gentle squats while holding onto a chair, slow arm and leg lifts, done in a standing position. At first, it was awkward. His legs shook a little. His coordination felt rusty, like trying to ride a bicycle after many years. But he stuck with it. Every morning, before breakfast, just 10 to 15 minutes. The first few days were about learning the movement. By the end of the first week, he could hold his balance longer. After 2 weeks, he walked with a little more certainty. To support this physically, he also revisited his diet, not for cramps or blood pressure this time, but for neuromuscular support. He focused on foods rich in magnesium and potassium, 2 minerals that help nerves communicate properly with muscles. Bananas, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, beans, and spinach became regulars at every meal. He added sesame seeds to his porridge, a habit his grandfather had once practiced. Good for the legs, his grandfather used to say. Now, Mr. Minh understood why. He also began drinking coconut water, a natural source of potassium, on hot days after gardening. It was refreshing, and he noticed that he didn't feel as shaky in the afternoons anymore. The hydration, combined with the minerals, gave his muscles a sense of calm strength. But beyond food and exercise, there was another element that made a surprising difference: foot awareness. He realized that years of wearing stiff sandals and walking on flat, hard surfaces had dulled the sensitivity of his feet. So, he started walking barefoot on soft grass each morning for a few minutes, letting his feet talk to the ground again, feeling the earth, the coolness, the uneven texture. This reawakened his foot muscles and deepened his sense of connection with the floor beneath him. He called it his grounding time. And with every step, he noticed how his toes began to spread more naturally, how his arches activated, and how he could feel tiny adjustments happening with each movement. Slowly, he was restoring a part of himself that had gone quiet over the years. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after his near fall, Mr. Minh was helping his granddaughter carry a basket of herbs from the garden. As they crossed a patch of uneven stones, she skipped ahead. Mr. Minh followed, carefully, confidently, and halfway through, he realized something. He wasn't afraid of slipping anymore. His feet gripped the ground instinctively. His steps were slower, but sure. That moment wasn't dramatic, but it was deeply affirming. That night, he wrote in his notebook, "Balance doesn't come from strength alone. It comes from connection, foot to brain, breath to body. Today, I walked steady." He also began sharing his balance practice with other elders in the neighborhood. During morning tea, he would show them how to shift their weight, how to stretch their ankles, how to do heel raises while waiting for the kettle to boil. It wasn't formal, but it was practical, and more than one neighbor started joining him in his morning porch routine. Through this process, Mr. Minh came to see balance in a new light. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. When his body felt steady, his mind felt peaceful. When his steps were confident, his thoughts were clearer. When his muscles responded predictably, his heart felt safer. Balance, it turned out, was also about trust. Trust in his body, trust in his awareness, trust in the present. By the end of the month, the near fall had faded from memory, but what it taught him remained strong. He no longer took his footing for granted. Every step, every stretch, every meal rich in nutrients had become an act of care. He had become his own therapist, coach, and student, all at once. And the most beautiful part? He no longer feared instability. Because now, he knew how to respond to it, not with panic, But with patience. Not with avoidance. But with action. It began subtly. Mr. Minh noticed that during his evening foot massages, the tips of his toes didn't feel quite the same. He could still move them, wiggle them freely. But when he touched them, the sensation was slightly dulled, like trying to hear a song with cotton in your ears. It wasn't total numbness. Just less. Less feeling. Less warmth. Less clarity. He ran his fingers across the pad of his big toe. There it was again, that muted feedback. As if something inside his body had fallen asleep. He tapped the sole of his foot gently. No pain. No cold, but less response than before. It was subtle enough to ignore. But Mr. Minh had learned better by now. Small symptoms often speak the loudest, if you're willing to listen. That night, he wrote in his journal. Toes feel distant. Not painful. But not fully present. Is this the nerves? Or the blood? The next day, he mentioned it during his regular check-in at the clinic. The doctor nodded gently. Not alarmed. This is common, she explained. It may be a sign of reduced peripheral circulation, or early nerve dulling from oxygen deficiency in the tissues. The key is to keep your small vessels healthy and make sure your blood carries what it should. She explained that while large arteries and veins get the most attention, the smallest blood vessels, called capillaries, carry nutrients and oxygen to nerves, skin, and tissue. When circulation is compromised, even slightly, these tiny vessels can begin to struggle. And over time, nerves starved of oxygen and nutrition begin to lose sensation. The good news? It could often be improved. With the right combination of movement, hydration, and the right foods, especially those that support microcirculation, the sensation could come back. That word, microcirculation, stuck with him. He imagined it like the smallest canals in the Mekong Delta, winding through tiny villages, delivering life to places larger boats couldn't reach. Without those small rivers, the system collapsed. So, he began a new mission, to feed his capillaries. The doctor recommended a few foods known to support blood vessel flexibility and nerve health: berries, especially dark-colored ones like mulberries and blackberries, rich in anthocyanins, beets, known to help expand blood vessels and improve oxygen delivery, and garlic, which supported vascular tone and reduced stiffness in arterial walls. That evening, Mr. Minh took a slow walk to the garden and picked a few young beet leaves and spring onions. He remembered the small patch of wild mulberries that grew near the back path, fruits he used to snack on as a boy. The next morning, he collected a small bowl of them, their juice staining his fingers dark purple. He added them to his porridge, alongside sliced bananas and a sprinkle of sesame seeds. Each morning afterward, he made a variation of this bowl, sometimes with berries, other times with slices of boiled beetroot or a spoonful of turmeric and black pepper. He called it his circulation bowl. It wasn't fancy, but it felt alive. He also began adding garlic to most of his meals, smashed and left to sit before cooking, just as his grandmother used to do. He didn't mind the smell. In fact, it reminded him of childhood, the scent of healing, of care. Within 10 days, he began to notice subtle shifts. One morning, as he massaged his feet, he pressed along his big toe and felt a sharper sense of contact. The edge of numbness had softened. The response was clearer. A few days later, the tingling in his second toe returned, not painful, but gently buzzing, like a foot waking up after sitting too long. He smiled. Most people hated that sensation. But to Mr. Minh, it was a welcome sign that circulation was returning. He also adjusted his daily walk to include more deliberate steps. Rather than rushing or pacing quickly, he walked barefoot for a few minutes on the grass and gravel behind his house, paying attention to how each toe pressed into the earth. He called it his foot awakening practice. He also began gripping a soft towel with his toes each morning, strengthening the small muscles that supported nerve responsiveness. But it wasn't just food and exercise. He realized that stillness could help, too, if practiced correctly. During the late afternoons, he would sit in silence, legs elevated, eyes closed, and simply breathe deeply for 10 minutes. He visualized the blood moving through his toes, nourishing the nerves, soaking into the tissues. Whether or not it helped physically, he couldn't say. But afterward, his feet felt more alive, as if the simple act of awareness had sparked something deeper. By the third week, the numbness had retreated from the tips of his toes to the outer edges. He marked it in his notebook. Toes talk again. Not loudly, but clearly. Thank you. Beets and berries. One particularly joyful moment came when his granddaughter dared him to walk across the yard barefoot in the early morning dew. He hesitated. It had been years since he had done something like that, but accepted. As his feet touched the cold, wet grass, he felt a rush of sensation. Every nerve lit up. It was shocking, beautiful, invigorating. He burst out laughing. A deep, bellyful laugh he hadn't felt in months. His wife looked on from the porch and smiled. "You're barefoot and grinning like a boy again." "Because I can feel it," he said. "All of it. Even the cold." In that moment, Mr. Minh realized something important. He wasn't chasing perfect health. He was chasing connection between his body and the earth, between his food and his cells, between what he once ignored and what he now honored. He didn't expect the numbness to disappear completely, but he had learned how to nurture the vessels that fed his nerves. He had discovered that what we feel or don't feel is often a reflection of what we feed. And that sometimes, sensation returns not just through treatment, but through presence, playfulness, and patience. That evening, he sat with his feet soaking in warm water laced with lemongrass and mint, toes wiggling under the surface. He smiled quietly, looking down at them. "They're still with me," he whispered, "and I'm still with them." The sun was just beginning to set when Mr. Minh decided to take the back stairs up to his cousin's second-floor house. It wasn't a long climb, just 15 steps or so, with a handrail and a clear view of the garden below. He had made that climb many times before, but this time, something felt different. By the 7th step, he noticed it, a tightness in his chest, a slight flutter in his heartbeat, and a strange heaviness in his arms. His breath quickened. His legs were fine, but his lungs, they weren't keeping up. He paused at step 9, placed one hand over his heart, and the other on the rail. He waited. After a few deep breaths, the feeling passed. No pain, no collapse. But something inside him said, "Don't ignore this." That evening, as he sat under the stars sipping warm lotus tea, he couldn't shake the memory of those stairs. It wasn't just the climb, it was the message behind the breathlessness. The climb had only lasted 20 seconds, yet his body reacted like it had run a marathon. It wasn't normal. Not for him. Not anymore. Mr. Minh knew that poor circulation didn't only affect the legs, the heart, the lungs, the brain, they were all part of the system. If blood wasn't moving efficiently, oxygen wasn't reaching the cells that needed it most. He had spent so much time focusing on his legs, his toes, his calves, but had he forgotten the core? The next morning, he visited the clinic once again. The nurse took his blood pressure. It was slightly elevated. His oxygen levels were normal at rest, but the doctor suggested they do a simple walking test. After walking briskly for 6 minutes, Mr. Minh's heart rate rose higher than expected, and his breathing grew shallow. "It's not alarming," the doctor reassured him, "but your heart is telling us something. It's working harder than it should, and that means it needs support, especially now." She explained how vascular stiffness, especially in older adults, can make it harder for the heart to pump blood efficiently. If your blood vessels are narrow or rigid, she said, your heart has to push harder to move blood through them. Over time, that can leave you feeling breathless even during small exertions. Mr. Minh nodded. This wasn't a new problem. It was the next chapter of the same story, circulation. And now, the focus needed to shift to his heart. The doctor encouraged him to add 2 things to his daily routine. Breathing exercises, slow, controlled breathing that could improve lung capacity and lower resting heart rate. Cardiovascular supportive foods, especially those rich in coenzyme Q10, flavonoids, and healthy fats. Mr. Minh took it seriously. Each morning, before sunrise, he sat by his window, eyes closed, practicing 4-7-8 breathing. Inhale through the nose for 4 seconds. Hold for 7. Exhale slowly for 8. At first, it made him dizzy, but within days, it became a rhythm he looked forward to. His chest felt more open. His mind felt calmer. And slowly, the tightness he once felt after climbing stairs began to fade. He also made adjustments in the kitchen. He increased his intake of omega-3 fats by eating more fatty fish like mackerel and sardines. He used extra virgin olive oil on nearly everything. He added pomegranate juice, when available, and began sprinkling cinnamon in his morning porridge, not for flavor, but for its blood pressure benefits. He also discovered coenzyme Q10, a compound naturally produced by the body but reduced with age. While supplements were available, Mr. Minh chose to go the food route, adding beef heart, spinach, and broccoli to his meals. These were humble ingredients, but packed with nutrients that supported his heart's energy production and efficiency. One unexpected change came through music. After dinner, instead of television, Mr. Minh began playing soft, instrumental music. As it played, he would sit quietly and synchronize his breathing to the melody. Inhale, hold, exhale, rest. His granddaughter called it Grandpa's quiet concert. To him, it was therapy, simple, effective, and soul-soothing. By the second week, he climbed the same back stairs again. This time, slowly, steadily, pausing halfway not from breathlessness but just to test himself. No tightness, no panic, just a soft, strong beat in his chest and the gentle rise and fall of breath that reminded him he was alive, aware, and adapting. That night, he wrote, "The heart doesn't ask for much. Just breath, kind food, a bit of rhythm, and someone to listen when it speaks." He also began sharing his breathing practice with his old friends at the tea corner. While some laughed it off, "That's yoga stuff," others joined him quietly the next morning, mimicking his breaths while seated on wooden stools. Mr. Minh didn't correct them. He just smiled, watched, and breathed alongside them. He knew now that circulation was more than movement. It was how you breathe, what you eat, how you rest, and whether you allow your heart to recover between each effort. The stairs had taught him that. He realized something else, too. So many men his age focused on strength, on lifting, fixing, proving, but few focused on the softness required for endurance, the grace of breathing, the power of letting the heart slow, the courage of stillness. By the end of the month, he no longer feared the short climb. He welcomed it. It became his daily check-in. And each time he reached the top, he whispered, "We're getting stronger, old friend." His heart, his breath, his legs, they were no longer isolated parts. They were now in harmony, woven together through food, movement, and presence. And the breathless climb? It had become the moment he learned how to listen, not just to his legs, but to his life. It was a warm Tuesday afternoon when Mr. Minh first noticed the swelling. He had just finished weeding a corner of his vegetable garden. the kind of light task he usually enjoyed, especially with the breeze from the river nearby. But when he sat down to untie his sandal straps, he saw it. His right ankle looked puffier than usual, as though water had collected just beneath the skin. At first, he pressed down gently with his finger. The skin didn't bounce back right away. Instead, it left a small indentation. He'd seen this before, pitting edema. He tried to convince himself it was just the heat, or maybe the long hours on his feet. But deep down, he knew better. It wasn't pain, but it was a signal. He didn't panic. Instead, he poured himself a warm cup of water with a slice of lemon, sat down, and reflected. He recalled something the doctor had said a few months earlier: if the blood isn't circulating well, it can leak into surrounding tissues, especially in the legs. It's like a river overflowing when the banks are too weak. Mr. Minh looked down at his feet and thought, the river needs a little help again. That evening, he elevated his legs on a bamboo stool for an hour while reading an old book of poems. The swelling eased slightly, but the next day, it returned, this time in both ankles. That was enough of a message for him. At the clinic, the nurse confirmed his suspicion: it was mild fluid retention, likely linked to his venous insufficiency. The veins were having a harder time pushing blood back toward the heart, and fluid was escaping into the soft tissues. Not dangerous, she reassured him, but it's a sign we need to support your circulation further. It's time to help your body gently flush out what it's holding on to. So began Mr. Minh's next chapter: natural detoxification and lymphatic support, not through extreme fasts or expensive supplements, but through food, rest, and gentle movement. The doctor explained that the lymphatic system, which works alongside blood vessels, helps remove waste and excess fluid from the body. But unlike the heart, it doesn't pump on its own. It needs help from walking, stretching, hydration, and certain foods that support drainage. That same day, Mr. Minh made a list of foods known for their gentle cleansing effects. He smiled to see how familiar they were: cucumber, celery, lemongrass, green papaya, turmeric, pineapple, parsley and coriander, dandelion leaf, lotus root. He began his mornings with warm water infused with lemongrass and a slice of ginger, something his grandmother used to give him after long days in the fields. He also made a simple detox broth: simmered green papaya, celery, a few lotus seeds, and crushed garlic. It was light, fragrant, and surprisingly satisfying. Within days, the swelling began to ease. His legs felt lighter by midday. He still elevated them after lunch, but now he added a few yoga-style stretches, slow leg lifts, hip openers, and calf pumps done while lying flat on the mat. Each movement helped encourage drainage without strain. But perhaps the biggest transformation came through something even simpler: sweating. Each afternoon, around 3 p.m., when the house was quiet, Mr. Minh sat outside in a light cotton shirt, feet bare, drinking warm detox tea and letting the sun encourage a light sweat. Not enough to exhaust him, but enough to open the pores, stimulate circulation, and gently release retained fluids. He began calling it his sun rinse. He did it with intention, not as punishment or exercise, but as a quiet offering to his body, letting go of what it no longer needed. He also started using dry body brushing, a traditional method his wife had seen in an old wellness booklet. Using a soft bristle brush made from bamboo, Mr. Minh would gently sweep upward from his ankles toward his thighs, always in the direction of the heart. He said it felt like combing the energy out of his skin. And after just a week, he noticed his skin tone improved and the mild puffiness decreased dramatically. One evening, his daughter noticed. "Bo, your feet look much better today." Mr. Minh looked down and nodded. Because I started listening again. He said. The swelling was just the blood asking for more space. At the end of that week, he added a new page to his notebook, signs of lightness. Ankles not swollen today. Shoes fit more comfortably. Legs didn't feel heavy after sitting. Skin softer around feet. Woke up without stiffness. But this wasn't just about fluid, it was about letting go. In more ways than one. Mr. Minh began journaling more regularly. Writing not only about symptoms, but about thoughts he hadn't shared, worries about aging. About being a burden. About losing independence. He wrote them down. Then took a walk. Then returned and crossed them out. I release this. He'd whisper. I release this too. The swelling never returned as strongly again. Some days, it nudged him. But now, he had tools. Lemon water. A few deep squats. A warm soup. A moment of stillness under the tree. And the greatest tool of all, awareness. One day, his neighbor joked, Minh, you walk like a man who just came from a massage. Mr. Minh grinned and replied, that's what happens when your blood and your water start flowing in the same direction. That night, he wrote one more line in his journal before sleep. The body knows how to heal. Sometimes. It just needs a little clearing. Of fluid. Of fear. Of the things we hold without knowing. It was a bright, quiet morning, one of those days when everything feels still and unhurried. Mr. Minh was sitting by the canal, watching dragonflies skim across the surface of the water. He had just returned from a walk, longer than usual, through the rice fields and around the lotus pond. And for the first time in a long time, he hadn't needed to stop. No cramp. No heaviness. No numbness. Just steady, grounded steps. And an ease he hadn't felt in years. As he sat there in the soft light, something struck him, not just physically, but emotionally. My body feels like mine again. It wasn't perfect, of course. There were still little signs of age, an occasional twinge in the knees. A bit of fatigue if he pushed too hard. But overall, there was a sense of wholeness, of connection. He didn't feel like he was fighting his body anymore. He felt like he was with it, moving together. Listening. Responding. He closed his eyes and thought back to the beginning of the journey, those sleepless nights with muscle cramps. The fear of numb toes. The day he lost his balance while picking papayas. Back then, everything felt uncertain. He didn't know whether things would get better, or whether this was just part of getting old. But now, after months of small, consistent changes, he had arrived somewhere unexpected, not just in health, but in mindset. He realized that circulation wasn't just about blood. It was about energy, attention, and presence. It was about how food moves through the body, how breath flows through the lungs, how thoughts move through the mind. All of it mattered. All of it was connected. Over the past few months, he had transformed in ways that went far beyond what he had set out to fix. Yes, the numbness in his toes had faded. Yes, his legs felt lighter. Yes, he could walk farther, stand longer, and sleep more deeply. But the bigger shift, the one he felt in his bones, was this. He had become someone who paid attention. He paid attention to the way his body felt after a bowl of beet soup, to how his breathing changed when he walked at sunrise, to how his feet responded after a mint soak, to how he stood, how he stepped, how he sat. Every part of his day had become a gentle dance of observation and care. Even the food he once took for granted now held meaning. A slice of guava wasn't just a fruit. It was vitamin C feeding the elasticity of his vessels. A handful of almonds wasn't just a snack. It was vitamin E protecting his arteries from stress. A spoon of turmeric in his morning broth wasn't just color. It was anti-inflammatory gold. And garlic, his daily companion, had become a ritual of strength and prevention. grounding his meals with purpose. His notebook had grown thick with pages. Not just symptoms and food logs, but reflections, lessons, reminders. Some entries were simple. Walked 25 minutes. No pain. New soup, green papaya plus lotus root, very light. Didn't need to rub legs tonight. Felt fine. Others were deeper. Woke with energy. Maybe the blood is finally flowing better to the brain. Balance improves when I slow down, not just my body, but my expectations. My health is not something to fix. It's something to honor. One day, while reading back through his notes, he found a page from months ago. It read, "Toes feel distant. Not painful, but not fully present." He smiled. He hadn't felt that in weeks. His toes were warm now. Responsive. He wiggled them in his sandal and laughed softly. That night, he sat with his granddaughter on the porch. The stars bright overhead. "Ong, how come you're always drinking soup and stretching your feet?" He looked down at her small hands playing with his old walking stick. "Because one day," he said gently, "I stopped feeling my feet. And when I started taking care of them, I started feeling the rest of me too." She nodded slowly, as if storing it away for later. Mr. Minh had become something of a quiet teacher in the village. People came to him for advice, not dramatic health fixes, but small tips. What to eat when your legs swell. How to ease nighttime cramps. Whether mint or ginger is better for soaking. He didn't pretend to know everything. He just shared what had worked. Always with humility. "Start with listening," he would say. "Then give your body what it's been asking for." One afternoon, his friend Uncle Bay came by, complaining of tingling feet. Mr. Minh poured him a cup of warm ginger cinnamon tea and handed him a small paper with 5 things written on it. Walk in the morning sun. Eat garlic with breakfast. Stretch before sleep. Soak your feet with lemongrass. Write down how you feel. "It won't fix everything," he said, "but it will change something." Uncle Bay looked at him, half smiling. "And what if it doesn't work?" Mr. Minh chuckled. "Then you'll be more awake in your own body. That's worth something too." As the months passed, Mr. Minh stopped seeing his health as a problem. He saw it as a garden, something to tend, not control. Some days would bring weeds. Some days would bring blossoms. But as long as he stayed close to the soil, watched carefully, and moved with respect, the garden would continue to thrive. And he, too, would continue to walk, slowly, steadily, with blood flowing and breath full. That night, in the quiet of his room, he wrote what would become his favorite journal entry. "Today, I felt light. Not because I lost something, but because I carried it differently." It was a Sunday morning like many others. The breeze from the river was gentle. The rooster had crowed just before dawn. And Mr. Minh was sitting beneath his tamarind tree, sipping a warm cup of water with lemon. But this morning felt different, not because of any physical sensation, but because of the quiet clarity in his heart. There was no tingling in his toes, no heaviness in his legs, no pressure behind his knees. He had slept peacefully, woke up without stiffness, and walked to the riverbank without effort. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a miracle. But it was real. And it had been building for months, quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. As he looked down at his feet, strong, grounded, comfortable, he thought to himself, "I'm not just managing symptoms anymore. I'm living again." That thought brought tears to his eyes. Not of sadness, but of recognition. Recognition of how far he had come. Of the man he had been before, quietly worried, constantly adjusting, unsure of what the future held for his mobility, his safety, even his independence. And now, here he was present, confident, steady. He remembered the day he couldn't walk 100 meters without stopping. The night he woke up from a cramp so strong it made him cry out. The moment he tapped his toes and felt nothing. Each of those moments had carried fear. But they had also carried direction. They had been signposts. Not sentences. Now, months later, those same signals had transformed into tools, ways he connected with his body. Ways he listened, responded, and nourished himself. That morning, instead of his usual walk alone, he invited his wife to join him. She was surprised. He hadn't asked in years. But she smiled, grabbed her sun hat, and they stepped out together. As they strolled through the familiar paths lined with banana trees and wildflowers, he shared memories of how this road had once felt so long, so heavy. Now, it simply felt open. They walked slowly, arms brushing, talking about their grandchildren, the changing weather, and the joy of guava season. Every step felt like a thank you. Thank you to his legs. Thank you to his breath. Thank you to the food, the herbs, the mornings of discipline, and the nights of quiet awareness. Later that day, he sat down with his journal, now nearly full. The pages had become more than a log. They were a story of returning. To health. To rhythm. To himself. He opened a fresh page and began to write what he now understood to be the foundation of his journey, not a list of symptoms, but a list of lessons. Mr. Minh's 10 lessons from his circulation journey. The body always whispers before it screams. Listen early. Food is not fuel, it's language. Learn to read it. Movement is medicine, but only when done with care. Rest is not weakness. It is preparation for strength. Healing is not about removing all discomfort. It's about building a better response. Breath is your companion. Use it to guide you. Your feet are your foundation. Respect them. Warm them. Move them. Pain can be a teacher, but only if you stop to learn. You're not chasing youth. You're chasing presence. You don't need to fix your body. You need to support it. Trust it. Befriend it. He stared at that list for a long time. It wasn't written for anyone else. It was written for the version of himself that had once believed that aging meant decline. That once thought pain was inevitable. That once thought his body had betrayed him. He now knew the truth. His body had never stopped trying. It was simply waiting for him to join the conversation. That evening, he hosted a small gathering for his closest friends, nothing fancy. Just hot tea, light snacks, and chairs in the garden. As they laughed and shared stories under the lantern light, Mr. Minh stood up gently and said, "You know, I used to think getting old meant slowing down. But now I think it just means becoming more precise. More intentional. You don't move less. You move better. You don't eat less. You eat smarter. And you don't live less, you just live more wisely." The group clapped softly, half amused, half inspired. They knew this wasn't just a speech. It was a summary of everything he had lived through. And it was clear, from the color in his cheeks, the way he stood, the strength in his voice, that he was living proof. In the weeks that followed, Mr. Minh continued his routines, but now with a lightness. Not a checklist. He still walked, still massaged his feet, still ate garlic and greens and beets. But it no longer felt like a treatment plan. It felt like self-respect. Sometimes, he would skip his morning walk just to sit by the river and watch the boats drift by. Other times, he would nap after lunch and not feel guilty. He knew now that the purpose of health wasn't just to avoid disease. It was to enjoy life with presence, mobility, and peace. And when the occasional cramp did return, or when his legs felt a bit tired, he didn't fear it. He smiled, acknowledged it, and asked himself, "What do I need today?" That question alone, he believed, had changed everything. He ended his journal with one final line. "My blood flows. My breath is steady. And I am here." So, what have we learned from Mr. Minh's journey? It began with small signs, tingling toes, leg cramps, and that dragging heaviness he once ignored. But instead of waiting for things to get worse, Mr. Minh chose to listen. He made gentle, consistent changes, eating circulation-friendly foods like garlic, beets, and leafy greens, walking each morning, stretching with intention, hydrating mindfully, and learning to breathe in rhythm with his body. Step by step, his symptoms eased. The cramps faded. The numbness reversed. His balance returned. He went from managing discomfort to reclaiming confidence, not just in his legs, but in the way he lived. His story reminds us of something powerful. Circulation is not just about blood, it's about connection. Our body speaks in whispers long before it shouts. We don't need expensive treatments to heal, just awareness, movement, and the right food at the right time. Whether you're facing leg fatigue, poor balance, or just feeling off, the solution often starts with small, doable shifts. Mr. Minh didn't chase perfection, he chased presence. And in doing so, he reconnected with himself. So ask yourself, what is your body trying to tell you today? Let Mr. Minh's journey be your invitation to walk a little more. Stretch with care, eat with purpose, and trust that your body is capable of healing at any age. Because no matter where you are on your health journey, it's never too late to feel strong again. And like Mr. Minh, you might just find that the path to better health begins with listening. Take care of your legs. Take care of your life. We'll see you in the next video.